Someone once told me to never give advice unless someone asks for it. And then, even then, don't. Advice can be taken as judgment or criticism, and I don't think anyone likes to be judged. I certainly don't. I don't like to be criticized. I don't like to be corrected. That's why my wife holds her tongue most all day long. But someone forgot to tell the Lord's prophet Amos about not giving advice, not judging. Amos had a reputation for criticizing and condemning his own people, the nation of Israel, and he did it as a prophet. One of his recurring warnings was that a nation isn't judged by its belief in God or its religious piety or its past history of good faith. A nation is judged by its care for its people. Amos saw a lack of care, a lack of justice in Israel, and he let them know it. The Israelites, as we heard, didn't really appreciate the criticism. Some of them were saying, you're just a guy who's trying to make money with these prophecies, and you go get out of here and go do that somewhere else. So Amos kind of defended himself, and we hear this probably through 7 chapters of this book. I'm not going to read all those chapters to you. I'll just remind you of what you just heard that Jim read for us. This is Amos kind of replying to his critics, and he says this: "You say, prophesy not against Israel, preach not against the house of Isaac. Now, thus says the Lord, we hear your wife shall be made a harlot in the city, and your sons and daughters shall fall by the sword. Your land shall be divided by measuring line, and you yourself shall die in an unclean land. Israel shall be exiled far from its land." History tells us what? Amos was right. The Israelites, God's chosen ones, ultimately lost their land. They lost their once prosperous nation, not because they lacked religious rules or prayer or piety. Israel was destroyed because it lacked justice. Without justice for all God's people, Israel could not claim to be a nation under God, and it could not experience joy and peace. This is still true for any nation today. Without justice, a nation, even our nation, the United States, will suffer the consequences of injustice. What are those consequences? Division, strife, and eventually an unjust nation, a nation that does not work for justice for all of its people, will collapse. Many of us believe we're headed that way right now, even as we celebrate Independence Day. Now, there is good news. The good news is this. I can't leave without good news. Now you're getting excited because I'm almost finished. Good news. I know how you are. The good news is this. We, like every nation, we have a chance to turn to God and embrace justice every day. And that justice doesn't have to wait for different laws or for different leaders to emerge. That justice begins in our neighborhoods and in our homes. It begins with you, and it begins with me. And I'm here to tell you, like Amos did, that we still have work to do. I know this because my kids, right? Not that I'm a bad father. You're already thinking I'm going to talk about how I'm a bad parent. No. I know this because my kids have grown up in this country, this beautiful country. They've been in magnet and fundamental schools, the best schools with the best kids from the best families. That's what we tell ourselves. But in those schools, in these best schools, my kids have been made fun of because of the way they look, because of the shape of their eyes. A friend who lives about an hour from here just told me through tears that she's afraid. She's afraid for herself. She's afraid for her children. She heard some men talking in her local hardware store about politics, the election, and they said, if the election doesn't go our way, those Mexicans better watch out. This is in a public store, and they saw her in there. They knew what they were saying. She lives in a neighborhood where she hears guns go off at night. She sees a lot of their Confederate rebel flags flying around the neighborhood. Now, there are, of course, things we see in the news. They're isolated incidents, but they're still there. Acts of injustice, acts of violence, and death caused by racism. Her fears are real. They're real to her. She's a Mexican immigrant. She's a business owner. She's a super Catholic volunteer. That's how I know her. She's an American, and she is afraid in America. And that is unjust. None of us should be afraid. And many of you may be afraid, and that is unjust. We can do better. We need to do better. We have to do better for God's sake. We can't let our concerns, our fears over illegal border crossings spill into anger and racism against all immigrants. We can't use racist language condemning everyone coming over the border as rapists, thieves, drug dealers, and freeloaders. It's simply not true. It's not true. It's not just. And it's dangerous. It's language that encourages the racists among us to be loud, and it encourages them to act out in violence. We can't go backward to the injustice that God condemns, the injustice that called all the Irish immigrants violent drunks and that created signs that said Irish need not apply, the injustice that labeled all the Italian immigrants as untrustworthy criminals and unsavory Catholics. That happened. The injustice that condemned Polish immigrants as unskilled, unintelligent, and backward. It happened. It happened. We can't allow that injustice to stain our nation again. We have to speak out against it and speak up for Christ's call to love God by loving our neighbor. Now, I hope I haven't offended anyone. I'm not accusing anyone here of any of these things. For those of you who know me, I hope you know where I'm coming from. But I am hoping to inspire you to speak out against things that we know are wrong, to be brave like Amos and speak out against the injustice that God abhors, and to support and defend those who are being unjustly condemned. America has a great history of working for justice. We've gone from a nation that enslaved people to a nation that fought to free the enslaved. We've moved from putting children into sweatshops to putting them into classrooms. We decided to guarantee the right to a good education for everyone, regardless of background or income. We've gone from judging and isolating single mothers to supporting and helping them raise their children in a community of love. We faced our own mistakes and fought for justice for the victims of racism and sexism and exploitation and greed. I'm asking you, let's continue God's work of justice together as one nation under God. Now, maybe I'm not very inspiring right now. I get that. It's early. But for a little more inspiration, I invite you to listen to these words from the song, America the Beautiful. And if you're brave, we'll sing that today. Maybe we'll turn the video off before we do that. I don't know. But listen to these words one more time. It's July the 4th. It's a good time to listen to these. America, America, God mend your every flaw. Confirm your soul in self-control, your liberty in law. These words are a prayer, a call to God to help us listen to his call to justice, to right our wrongs, to temper our fears and frustrations with a self-control that heals and purifies our souls. Finally, these words are a call to exercise and protect our freedom by observing laws that are just in God's eyes. Laws that ensure God's liberty and God's justice, not just for some, but for all.